Good afternoon, everyone. We are Hot Power and Individuals RT. We have Anna, Katsura, Junya, Tomoya, Siyuma, and me, Yui, as presenters. Okay, so for the introduction, we as a Hot Power and Individuals RT first thinking about what the hard power is, and here is our definition. Hard power is an enforcement of the power related to economy, policy, and so on, and it has been influential to individuals. This shows this power is related to all individuals' activity, and we divide activities in different four perspectives: political, economical, historical, and cultural. In our presentation, we will focus on the topic of national bases in Japan to see how hard power has been influential to individuals and how there's a difference in the comprehension in the bases in Japan. So we're going to start from the political aspect of hard power in national bases in Japan.
First of all, we must understand that the fundamental purpose of Japan and the US is the establishment of international security order in Asia-Pacific region, where China proceeded with a policy of expansion and started to realize the establishment of influence. It's impossible for Japan to survive in the midst of disputes in East Asia alone without taking one side, China or America. And it's unimaginable for Japan to become China's ally. In order to restrain China's naval forces activities in the East and South China Sea, Okinawa is playing crucial roles as a forward operation base. As you all can see on this map, Senkaku Islands, where the disputes between Japan and China take place, is quite far from Japan's mainland, but close to Taiwan and China. If America withdrew from Okinawa, it will mean that they abandoned the established influence all over East Asia and lost intention of encountering China in Asia-Pacific, which is why this idea is improbable. National security policy can hardly take any shape by listening to the voice of local residents alone. However, without a profound comprehension on their emotions, it will be extremely hard to carry out a functional, sustaining national security policy. I'd like to end my part with this quote by Margaret Thatcher. There is no such thing as society. There are individual men and women, and there are families. No government can do anything except through people, and people must look to themselves first.
I'd like to talk about traditional aspects in Japan. First of all, I'll talk about historical background. Japan lost all of its hard power as a defeated nation after World War II. Then, Japan was ruled by the HQ, and they pushed democratization and demilitarization of Japan. Also, more bases to be placed in Japan under traditional security. Traditional security means security that focuses on how to respond to military threats to a country using hard power, mainly military force. Especially, the base burden has been concentrated in Okinawa. Next, the impact of the base placement includes the following. From macro perspective, Japan's economy has recovered. From micro perspective, individuals have been at risk of basement. Therefore, as a conclusion, we can say that the placement of US military bases has led to a significant economic revival, and many people have benefited from the wealth of society. On the other hand, the problems caused by the placement have had and continue to have serious effects for individuals.
Then I will explain the economic aspect of hard power. First, we regard hard power as something like compelling power. Then what is economic compelling power? Here, I define it as forcing other subjects to do something by the power of money, in a broad sense. Related to the United States-based problem in Japan, I came up with the following example. The relationship between the Japanese government and Okinawa prefectural government. Please look at the right-hand figure. This shows a change in the financial transfer from Japan to Okinawa, and it's called Okinawa Promotion Budget. The navy blue part of the graph is the budget that Okinawa can decide how to spend. and the sky blue part is that Japanese can decide. According to the graph, as time passes, the ratio of navy blue is decreasing. That is, the discretion of Okinawa Prefecture is relatively decreasing. On the other hand, simultaneously, Okinawa government's attitude towards the United States-based problem is more aggressive than before. This means Japan has decreased the budget in order to suppress rebellion from Okinawa. Too many bases are bothering Okinawan people's lives and identity, but Japan is trying to ignore them by financial hard power.
Next, I'll talk about the cultural aspect of national bases in Japan. So there has been a lot of friendship fair occurred in a lot of bases in Japan, but many of them hasn't been reported by the media. So I'd like to present them. In Yokota bases, there have been friendship fair held, and then most of the Japanese people visit there. And also Iwakuni bases, they also hold the friendship festival, and then a lot of children were communicating with American people living there. And also there have been international fair happen in Husa bases, and it's getting so popular in most of the residents in Husa. And also there's a friendship day in Yokosuka bases, and it's also memorable for most of the people who live there. So we also need to look upon that there are many good points about having bases in Japan, because it leads to have the good communication between America and Japanese people.
However, the American side did not have the same level of active discussion on the national basis as their Japanese counterparts did have. According to Pew Research Center, a majority of Americans, especially young Americans, think it is more important to build economic ties with China than believe it is important to have such ties with Japan. Therefore, instead of focusing on the Japanese military development, most Americans feel it is more important to address the rise of China. Because the US diverts its attention from Japan, therefore, during our research, it was difficult for the American delegates to find information on how the US interpret the current situation of Japanese national bases. Most of the sources were composed of the Japanese perspective, leaving out opinions on the American side. Thus, we predict that the US will know more about the US-China trade war than the national bases they have built in Japan. To not limit our prediction and discussion to our own RT group, we decided to create a survey and see how responses from JASC delegates might correlate with our difficulty in research from the American perspective. In our survey, there were a total of 4 questions. We first want to know the background of the delegates and then ask about how much they know about the controversy of American bases in Japan, how much they know about the US-China trade war, and what 3 countries they believe are the most influential in international relations. In total, from the JASC 72 conference, 34 participants answered all the questions. 14 are American delegates and 20 are Japanese delegates. Among the American delegates, 43% of people think US-China trade war is equally important to a national basis, but 36% of people think US-China trade war is more important than the national basis. 21% of people think the trade war is less important than the national basis. These results show that though certain American individuals are more aware of the national basis, the majority of American delegates are leaning towards knowing more about the US-China trade war. However, in contrast, the Japanese delegates have 50% of people that know more about the national basis than the US-China trade war. Only 20% of people from the Japanese side are more aware of the US-China trade war than the basis, showing how there is an unequal attention on the national basis between the American delegates and the Japanese delegates. We can also observe how most Japanese delegates consider the US as the most important country for international relations. However, Japan has not been listed in the top 3 on the most influential in international relations, which therefore makes the US pay less attention to the US-Japan relations and national bases.
Though the controversy of American bases in Japan is covered extensively in Japanese media and politics, it is virtually non-existent in American media and politics, which may be an explanation as to why there is a gap in understanding between Japanese and Americans. In fact, the majority of US politics and media is concerned not with international affairs, but with domestic affairs. The top 3 policies that were considered a priority were all domestic issues: the economy, healthcare costs, and education. Consequently, in a 2018 poll, 71% of Japanese people said that they do not believe the US considers Japanese interests. When the same poll was conducted in the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia, and South Korea, the majority of people in each country expressed that they do not believe the US considers their country's interests. This showcases the international consensus of American unilateralism. Unlike multilateralism, which is defined by cooperative action between states, unilateralism is an approach to international relations where a state acts without considering the interests of other states. Discussion of American unilateralism was prominent during Junior's presidency, where he unsigned or withdrew from the Kyoto Protocol's International Criminal Court and the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. Examples of current American unilateralism are President Trump's withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership and America's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord because he believed it hurted American jobs. The concept of Trump's America's First policy has resulted in a revamp of a unilateralist approach to diplomacy. And just as Bush Jr.'s presidency, the effects of this approach are negative to the image of the president, as you can see in this chart. In addition to the declining confidence in the US president, the damages of this approach to foreign affairs has resulted in a decline in the trust of America amongst Japanese people.
We believe that the American bases in Japan provide an interesting lens to view the relationship between American hard power and Japanese individuals, as well as how hard power in Japan affects individuals. Besides American national bases, other US-Japan related issues also do not receive an equal amount of attention from both the Japanese and American side. However, though the majority of Americans seems to leave out Japan from their main discussion on international affairs, there are many individuals who still consider US-Japan related issues as equally important as the US-China relations. Therefore, the mainstream opinion represented by hard power does not cover all, but only captures an aspect of all the voices. We believe that it's important to assess that American worldview as well as the American approach to hard power as the United States influence reaches outside the confines of its borders and are crucial to the future of US-Japan relationship. So we've been presenting the aspect of hard power as an example of national bases. However, you guys might be wondering why we did not touch on the individual aspect. But then looking back the process we have been researching about the national bases, we use survey asking the individuals to answer your thought, and we also ask close friends about the experience that is related to the defenses, national defenses. This shows how hard power is related to individual, and the individual is also related to hard power. So this is our conclusion. Thank you so much for listening.